I'm joined now by coach and now commentator Trevor Wittman. Trevor, how are you, sir?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you for making some time for us. Let's actually jump right into it. I have to say, what a pleasant surprise that was when we saw you at the UFC and ESPN Plus event as this sort of how would you define your role, right? Because on the one hand, you're discussing what's happening in the corners, but you were also talking about some of the action in the cage for the fights itself. So you're commentator, but what is your specific role?
I don't know. They had called me about a week prior and said, "Hey, we have this idea of calling how the corners work, and that's a lot like how Fox was. That ESPN is not going to be showing the corners, but pay-per-view does. So they asked if I can come and be a part of the ESPN events and do this position that they didn't know how it was going to work. So I showed up and." They put makeup on me, and I realized if they put makeup on me, I might be going on camera. And then they tested that out in the beginning and kind of ran with it. And they would just ask me here and there, "Do you want to jump in?" And I think we're just kind of swinging from the hip at the moment.
Well, I gotta say, if you're swinging from the hip, it's looking pretty good. So there was like no formal tryout for this or anything.
No.
Wow, that's so unusual in television. I'm sure you know that. Like just to get your dry run as the live version of it, that's highly unusual. Why do you think that is that they did
Yeah,
it this way?
I think they had told me that they might go on, it might not. So I think they tested it on the ESPN Plus the prelims, the early prelims.
Hmm.
So I guess it was going well because they kept me on every part. So
Now, have they discussed since then what their plan is?
yeah, at first they wanted me to do every one, and I just said, "Hey, man, I'm super busy with Onyx and with my athletes, and I don't want to take on too much." And they wanted me to see if I could do every one, and I just told them I'm not going internationally at the moment. I can't. And so they scheduled me for five of them, and then we'll decide how much further we go from that point.
I guess congratulations are in order. This is sort of like a surprise out of nowhere. I'm guessing you're pretty happy about it. Is getting into television, was that something you had eyed at some point in your future?
No, no, this is a complete surprise to me. I've never done any commentating or anything like that. When I had read the message, I actually didn't want to do it because commentating is not something I've ever wanted to do. But once I called Zach, and Zach told me, it was from a coach's perspective, they wanted, especially from the corners. I was intrigued to do it just because I think there needs to be more of that. But then again, here I'm supposed to come out and critique and talk how the corner's going. And, who am I to critique anybody on the sense that, I've done thousands of corners, but I would say not all of them have been superb. So it's one of those things going into this. I'm very humbled for them to ask me. And it's hard for me because I have such a good relationship with all the coaches out there. So, going out there and speaking the truth is what I'm going to do and always do. And just hopefully from the perspective of how the coaches and, the guys in my network who we share the same job understand that, where I'm at the moment is because of the many mistakes I made and gained through it. So I actually wish there was someone critiquing me back in the day because it's what it takes. It takes tons of critique, and I never want to call it criticism because criticism to me is a negative sense to it, but critiquing it and going back and saying, what can I do better in each fight as a coach, I think would be super beneficial to me. And I've always thought that way. I've always been my hardest critic. So, I've made some huge fails in the game. I mean, I was just thinking the other day, I remember when I forgot Verno Phillips' mouthpiece in a title fight in boxing, and I had no idea. I didn't even put the mouthpiece in. He came back and was like, "Damn, see?" And he sits down, and I'm like, look at that. I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "You forgot my damn mouthpiece." And I'm like, "I did?" And I touched my pocket. My mouthpiece was in there. And I have not forgot the mouthpiece since. And that was probably 2003. And it takes scenarios like that where, you know, it's just like the athlete. Athletes, it's all about performance, and you gain from your performance. And sometimes you don't perform, it really helps you out. And having that performance where I really dug into myself after that fight, and it helped me never to do that again. But I've got a laundry list of things that I laugh about what I've done in the corner before. So it's super cool to be able to get out there and do that. But again, it's never a position I want to take to ever go out there and critique people who I learn from, you know?
What would you say about the state of MMA cornering? I think you would agree, probably. I don't want to put words in your mouth, certainly, but for the time I've been observing the sport, the last decade and more, it's certainly gotten a lot better. But one of the things I've really noticed is a lot of U's don't exist. And by that I mean, number one, people who've done cornering in other similar combat sports, which is, and they have, in those other sports like boxing, long histories of cornering. And two, it's a lot of really young people. It's a lot of teammates who might also be active fighters cornering. You're seeing a little bit less of that now. You're seeing some generational shift. To me, that's made cornering a little bit better. Still a long way to go. What is your assessment of the state of MMA cornering?
Oh yeah, it's come a long way. I mean, I come from the boxing world, and the boxing world is, you have a couple other people in your corner, but one time I had to get on Miguel Diaz, who was a cut man and a very well-known cut man. And I was cornering Manuel Lopez, and he started like telling him what to do, and I had to jump on him. And I feel like doing the boxing cornering, it was really just you doing the instruction. And at least it was for me. I didn't have a big team, and a lot of times the boxing coach works with the boxer all the time, so that's who you're listening to. I know when I got into MMA, there was a lot of other coaches that you're working with, and that's where I felt like a big stick got put in the wheel, where it was very easy to have so many people telling you the right thing, and everybody could be saying the right thing, but it's so much information or so much going into the fighter where it makes cornering very, very, very tough. And just like you said, a lot of times it's athletes. And athletes want you to do good, but it's almost like listening to a mom yelling to her son on the wrestling mat. So you hear her saying "squeeze harder," and you're going, "All right, well, what does that mean?" It's definitely come a long way. And I mean, just being a part to really dig in and watch the corners. The night I got to do it in Brooklyn was very cool, and I thought everybody was doing a great job. I mean, there was a couple little critiques here and there, but it's super cool to see the level of coaches.
And look, there's a lot of different ways to be a good corner. So I'll ask you in this way, true or false? Not every good coach is a good corner man. Not every good corner man is necessarily a good coach. In other words, how different are those two roles? How similar are they?
I mean, you nailed it. A coach, someone who is working in the gym, there's so many good coaches. The difference between a good coach and a great coach, how I kind of put it, is a good coach can tell you what you need to do. And I can talk to people on the street who can tell your athlete what they need to do, but it's, can you show them how to do it? Can you explain when to do it, when not to do it, how to do it, how to set it up? And most importantly, make them believe in it. And then going into the corner work, it's really the same thing. You got tons of good corners, but the difference between a great corner is someone who understands their athlete on the mental side. You got to know how to piss them off. You got to know how to cool them down. You got to know how to you got to really just understand their psyche. And you got to be able to read that from not even just from their performance, but their body language and what's going on. And is there something going on the outside of the fight sport that's causing their performance to be there? And if you're with them all the time, you should know everything that's going on with them. I know a lot of people who coach and corner athletes that they're like their best friends. And I always say, hey, man, it's good to be a friend of an athlete. But a lot of times a good friend is going to tell you what you want to hear. But it's like being like a father. Like a father, you always want to let them know that you're proud of them, no matter what happens, because they're again, as long as they're out there doing their best effort, that's all that matters. But you got to be able to discipline them. You got to trust what they're doing on the outside. You got to know when to, really dig into them and know that they're not going to take it to heart and be like, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. It's more like that fatherly figure. I care about you, and I care about your you not getting hurt in here. And that's where that bond has to be so strong. And really, I feel like that's the key to being a great coach slash cornerman, vice versa, just the average good coach.
One of your most famous cornering moments was the you throwing in the towel or stopping the fight on behalf of Nate Marquardt. Obviously, he had a super decorated career, but certainly Father Time comes for us all. And when that happens, you need some people around you to make some of these very, very difficult calls. You're seeing calls like that, I think, a little bit more, Trevor. I would point to Duke Rufus after Anthony Pettis broke his hand against Tony Ferguson. You know, I can't, I mean, I'm sure you know this too. I mean, how many times have we seen guys with broken hands go back out into a fight? And Duke Rufus said, enough, right? We're just not going to fight under these circumstances. Do you believe that corners in MMA have a problem not stopping enough fights that maybe shouldn't have continued?
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing in this sport. I mean, it's really cool to go back and people are like, oh, Trevor's the first guy to stop a fight in MMA, and that's not true. I remember when Chuck Liddell, people jumped in and stopped the fight when he was fighting Rampage and Pride. There's and it's not only just if someone's getting beat up, like Nate had a situation that I was aware of prior to going into that fight, that the doctors were very concerned with his blood pressure. His blood pressure was super, super high. And we sat in the doctor's office, or if you're where the doctors sit prior to the fight, about 2 hours before he went out, and they were very concerned with his blood pressure. And then when I had seen him performing, I was like, there's something totally wrong. So I already had an awareness to it. But it's not that you just stop a fight that someone's getting beat up. It's where are they in that fight? And does the guy have your number that night? And the cool thing about MMA is there's so many different ways that the fight can be stopped. So I feel like that's a big key to a lot of people not stopping the fight, because that fight could just change so quick. To me, it's more about the mindset of where that athlete is. And if you're taking an ass whooping and that fighter clearly doesn't want to be in there, you've got to be the one that steps up and takes the sword. You have to jump in there and make it your fault, and let the fighter go and complain that you shouldn't have stopped the fight. Because the more times that you get beat inside that cage and you're getting dominated, that hurts you mentally, and that's hard to come back from. And whether you're just taking too many punches, or does your fighter need to be in there? Do you need to jump in there and save him and get him back mentally and re-strategize on what's going on? And again, this is a lot of psyche. You got to know your fighter, and the key to all athletes is being able to ride that money train, and ride that money train as long as they can. You see it with a lot of fighters. You almost see their careers completely change. And if you look at that, you've got to really pay attention to the 2 or 3 performances that change the way they performed in the cage, where you see guys that look invincible, and then all of a sudden they become human. And then all of a sudden you're going, wow, are they even gatekeeper level? And it was kind of like a scenario with Nate. When I had stopped the fight with Nate, I had so many people in my ear telling me, you need to stop fighting. And I'm like, well, he had the best performances I've seen in a long time in the gym, and he came back to win 2 after that. So it's, again, knowing the athlete and really sticking to your guns. And again, everybody's going to have something to say. How do you have to stick to your gut feeling of what's going on, and just pay attention to everything. Everything has factors. It's how are they performing in the gym? How are they mentally? Do they have too many things going on the outside that's causing them to be distracted? And that's where the cornerman / coach comes in and has to assess that. You are the co-pilot, and you have to put yourself in a scenario. I'm a co-pilot, but I'm on the outside. I'm not driving in the car with someone that if I make a wrong move, we're both rolling. It's like you've got to really understand that I'm not taking no damage, but you have to care for them and be willing to take some damage if you go out there and make a decision like that. And again, it's that fatherly love, almost parent-like love, but also just truth and honesty that they're getting to the goals they want to get to, if that makes sense.
You know, boxing stoppages seem to come from the corner anyway a little bit more easily, and one of the reasons people point to, well, there's several reasons, right? A lot of times those guys have guaranteed pay, so they don't have to worry about going out to see if a show or win, so that's a big one. Again, we talked about it before, you might have somebody who's been cornering for 40 years, quite literally, and so they've sort of seen it all. But the other one is that in MMA, we hold on to this idea, Well, I mean, even in jiu-jitsu, they don't have tech falls. We just saw a girl go up 91-0 in an IBJJF tournament because there's always this idea that maybe you could pull it around. MMA is so varied that you can always sneak out a victory. And I know we can all think of some times where that's true, but I got to tell you, Trevor, I think it's way overstated. And I think that's probably, and I want to see what you think about this, to me, it's combating that. You don't want to tell a fighter you never have a chance, but on some level, you got to live in reality and you got to weigh the costs and the benefits. And it seems like that's the more difficult challenge we're up against. I wonder what you make of that assessment.
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, it's you nailed it. It's a longevity. Again, one performance is not your career, and yes, you got to be the best you can every day, but sometimes you got to really assess the performance and what's going on. And again, that goes to the outside. Professional fighting and prize fighting, you take damage over the years, but again, can you cope with it, and can you rebound? And again, that comes a lot from the outside. There's lots of things that fighters go through, whether it's too much stardom. Do they get distracted? Do they not train enough? Where they have a family issue going on? And again, a lot of times it's going to cause a performance issue. I mean, just put it this way. You remember when Chael fought Anderson Silva, and Chael beat Anderson Silva for 5 rounds, but Anderson came back to win the fight. That's one of those fights that kind of stand out to me, where he found a way to win. He was the champion, but that was the downfall of his legacy. I mean, if you look at the next time he fought Chael again and dominated him, but then those performances right afterwards, you start to question your performances by your performance. And if he was doing everything possible, he's like, holy cow, I got held down for so long. Yes, I came back to win that fight, but he was the one that was in there. He's the one that deals with the soreness and what's going on, where he was somewhat invincible. And those type of fights make you question everything, especially the older you become. What comes with age is wisdom. You see young guys that are just reckless and can do it and don't get bothered by tough fights. But as time goes on, man, the tough fights, they wear on you.
What's an example of somebody, maybe from boxing again, or if it's MMA, let me know. But is there ever an example of just like really solid cornering, either stopping a beating from continuing, or energizing a fighter to reach their maximum potential? Is there any moment you could think of in a corner that was just incredibly pivotal and just really good work?
Teddy Atlas, I forget his name. I'm having a brain fart, but it was a few years ago. I had a great performance. He said, you got to go in the fire like a firefighter. I mean,
Timothy Bradley.
Motivational speech. Yeah, Timothy Bradley. What a great job by the corner. And, I always respected Teddy Atlas as a cornerman, and he made a great commentator. I actually learned a lot about coaching by listening to Teddy and the things and the philosophies he had to say. But that was a great corner just by seeing he's more of a full-time commentator / part-time coach. And it just shows, his philosophy by, it's how do you create energy? How do you create more energy? I mean, he was winning that fight, but he knew that there was momentum, and he was able to build that momentum into a fireball. And that's what a corner's there to do, is how do you create more momentum or shift the momentum? And that's always tough to do, is have a shift. How do you get into someone's head and make them believe that they can still win the fight? And that's again, that just takes time, experience, and again, philosophy, understanding how the mind works, and then understanding how your athlete works. I'll tell you what, cornering now, when I have 3 athletes compared to when I had a team at Grudge that 40 professional athletes, it's night and day different. When I was having too many athletes, there was a lot of things that I did, and I failed as a cornerman, as I failed as a coach. For instance, I had a guy named Alvin Robinson fighting, and I did an interview, and they asked me about Alvin Robinson's opponent, and I'm like, I was like, no, I don't think that's his opponent. And I mixed his opponent up with Justin Salas's opponent, and they're both 155 at the time. And that's where a big flag went off, where I was wearing too many hats. I had too many athletes. Another time is when Rose lost to Carla Esparza, and I didn't even talk to her about a 5-round fight. Here she is with 3 professional fights, fighting for a world title, coming off the Ultimate Fighter, and seeing how dominant she was on the Ultimate Fighter. Even when I wasn't coaching her, I became a fan. And man, she went out there and hit this pace, and after the first round, I didn't even catch on to it. And afterwards, I seen her start to cave, and 100% was that my fault as a coach, as a co-pilot, to not catch that and not plant the seeds that I needed to plant for a fighter that only had 3 fights fighting for a world title, who's so young. I still feel we should have won that fight if we would have understood the pace and understand a 5-round fight and understood the only way that Carla could have beat her. You know, it was almost like I came out as a fanboy / cheerleader. And those were part of the reasons why I gave up on Grudge and said, hey, you know, I went back to my boxing ways where I coach the athlete and I don't have too many people in the saying the right things, because everybody's saying it in different philosophies, and you got too many coaches, you know, coaching you where everybody's in the right mindset. But you're going from one workout and you got 3 workouts per day, and each coach is pushing you to the limit. And here you are overtraining. So there's just so many different experiences that you go through. It's just how do you audit it and make sure that it's balanced and again, all about the athlete.
And also, when you have been alluding to this the entire interview, how different your athletes are. Certainly it takes some humility on the part of the coach, but it also takes some keen awareness too. You've got Justin Gaethje, one of the most exciting, dynamic, incredible talents in the lightweight division, still highly ranked. He's going up against Edson Barboza, but I don't think it's any kind of controversial statement to say that, you know, that's a high risk, high reward kind of style that he has. Does it change the way, not so much that you corner, because that changes athlete to athlete, but I guess what I'm wondering is, as you approach that kind of fight, you're thinking about the strategy and the things he has to execute, but also the kind of fight style that he has and what requires it to succeed. Does it make cornering a little more tense? Does it make it a little more for you as they go high stakes? Do you go high stakes too? How does their fight style impact you?
I mean, it's everything. You know, Justin's a guy who really doesn't fear fighting. You know, he's a guy who loves it. He lives in that fire, and he just enjoys it. Like, that's where he's himself. But again, I've got to know when to pull it back, and then also who's a puncher, who's not a puncher, and taking those. There's a certain person you can take a clean shot from, but it's going to take 2 or 3 clean shots to put you away. But sometimes you face a guy who one clean shot is going to put you away. And you know, I'm very big in the position and understanding positions, and it's just, I really focus on where do we need to position ourselves in the fight, and then also through the rounds. How do we position ourselves, and when do we start to push the gas pedal, and when do we do it right away? What do we do? And there's the strategy of understanding how to be like a general and control a battle. How would you say, a scenario? What are they thinking? What are they thinking we're going to do? And do we switch that and try to? So there's so much fun stuff that goes into, you know, game planning and getting these guys ready, and then how do I assess myself in the corner to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then you always have to be prepared for, if it's not going your way, what are your seeds you're going to plant? How are you going to wake them back up? How are you going to get them back into the fight? So there's so many different perspectives that you need to put into play so you're prepared for those scenarios, which I never used to do in my early years as a coach. It was like, hey, this is our game plan, and then it changes, and then instantly the fighter can read that you're going into plan B, and that's more like Mayday. Instead of like, no, this is what we're expecting, and how do you make them feel that it's okay, we're good where we're at, this is what we need to do. And to me, I feel that's the key, is how do you let your fighter know he's still in the fight, and then get them to listen to what you're saying and trust what you're saying.
Well, I got to say, I certainly appreciate this conversation. I appreciated your first run on ESPN. I look forward to many more, schedule permitting. And best of luck to you with Justin against Edson and everything else you have going on this year. Thank you for your time, Coach. Really appreciate it.